This one's going to be fun. Coming up next, we're going to get into the dark underbelly of the 70s, where bad taste reigned supreme, controversy sold millions, and critical acclaim was strictly optional. We're going to take a ride through the songs that you hate to love, or maybe it's the songs that you love to hate, depending on your perspective, I guess. You're going to hear so many great stories, including the tale of one tune that was so far outside the norm, it managed to offend feminists and the religious right in one fell swoop. Another hit that was written by a bona fide convict, but it was crooned by one of rock's most righteous voices. It was a song that even as a 3-year-old, it made my ears bleed. And yes, even the song that dared to expose the carnal secrets of rodents. And finally, the worst song in the history of our planet. One that single-handedly destroyed a genre in just 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Man, it's going to be a lot of fun. Packed with eyebrow-raising stories, guilty pleasures, tacky tunes, and head-shaking comedy as we count down the 5 cheesiest songs of the 70s. Coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever wore the all-famous alligator Izod shirts back in the day, you're going to dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now, click the white button, and click the bell so you always know when our stuff comes out. Also, check us out at professorofrock.com for our live streams. And subscribe to our podcast on Apple or Spotify. It's searchable for every artist I've ever interviewed. And so many great episodes. I'll tell you what, click on the link right here or click below to get there. Rate us, follow us. It'll help us get into top 10, maybe even number 1. Okay, so today it's a very tricky countdown. Talking about the 5 cheesiest songs of the 70s, a couple honorable mentions. But I have to state a disclaimer before we start this countdown. I actually like some of these songs. I mean, come on, everybody likes a bad song. It's the epitome of a B movie for the ears.
So, be happy with what you got. So you can always get a hot dog.
I guess you could call them guilty pleasures, even though, you know, as I've gotten older, I don't subscribe to that term. If you like it, sing it loud and proud, and you shouldn't care what the cool people think. But even if you like a song, it doesn't mean that it isn't loaded with a big old chunk of cringe and cheese. This is going to be fun. Let's get into this. We'll see what you think. Our countdown begins with a really bad one. I don't know if anybody likes this song. You're Having My Baby by Paul Anka. So it was the summer of '74, and Paul Anka, a former teen idol who dominated the charts in the late 50s and early 60s, one of the smoothest voices ever, he was about to make one of the most astonishing comebacks in pop history. And he did it with a song that became both a massive hit and actually, head-scratchingly, one of the most controversial love ballads of its time. Also one of the cheesiest of the decade. You're Having My Baby, whether you liked it or loathed it, it got people talking, and it introduced Paul Anka to a new generation of fans. By the early 70s, Paul was, you know, kind of playing the oldie circuit, focusing more on songwriting and family life. He'd written hits for other artists. I mean, there was Tom Jones' She's a Lady, great song. But his own chart presence was non-existent at that point. And then one day, while on tour in Lake Tahoe, an idea hit him. Paul had recently become a father again, and in the middle of all the whirlwind emotions that come with expecting a child, he wrote a song as a tribute, not just to the baby, but to the woman carrying his new child. To him, it was a deeply personal expression of love and gratitude.
What a lovely way of saying how much you love me.
But Paul didn't go it alone. He actually brought in Odia Coates, a talented singer he'd been working with, to sing on the track. The result was a duet that stood out instantly, not just for the melody, but for its lyrics, which some found heartfelt, others found downright old-fashioned, even offensive.
Could I swept it from your life, but you wouldn't do it.
Okay, so Paul's lyric, an example being, you could have swept it from your life, but you wouldn't do it. That one drew sharp criticism from feminist groups who accused the song of being sexist or anti-choice. And then on another side of the spectrum, the religious right was offended that it was glorifying choice versus having the baby.
Didn't have to keep it, wouldn't put you through.
And really both sides were off a bit. Paul always stood by the intent. He said, you know, It's not political. It's personal. He said he even considered saying we're having our baby, but he went with your to emphasize the woman's role, and her sacrifice that she was making with having the baby.
What a lovely way of saying what you're thinking of me.
I can appreciate the sweet gesture that Paul was making on this song, You're Having My Baby, but the sentimentality was way over the top. Despite the social backlash, though, the song exploded. Paul Anka reminded the pop world that he knew how to write and craft a hit single.
Oh, the seed inside you, baby, do you feel it growing?
It shot to number 2 in Australia, number 6 in the UK, number 1 in Canada, and number 1 in the Billboard Hot 100, becoming Paul's first chart topper in 15 years. It also kicked off a string of successful duets between Anka and Coates, including One Man Woman, One Woman Man.
You're a one-man woman, but you love me. I'm having my baby.
Coming in at number 4 in the top 5 cheesiest songs of the 70s, it's the sappy, sentimental favorite, Sometimes When We Touch by Dan Hill from 1977.
And sometimes when we touch.
Yeah, I've tried to put my finger on it, but there's just something about Dan Hill's voice that hits me the wrong way. I don't say this lightly. It's like hearing a metal knife scrape across a metal plate. It's an intense reaction, and trust me, I wanted to give it the benefit of the doubt. Now, first, I thought maybe it was just Sometimes When We Touch, the signature hit from the late 70s. One of those love it or hate it ballads that has been parodied and praised in equal measure over the years. But then came 1987, when Dan teamed up with Vonda Shepard for the duet Can't We Try? And boom, I had the same reaction.
Can we try just a little bit harder?
That song actually climbed to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. It was a bona fide hit, and yet for me, it was like deja vu all over again. That same vocal tone, that same emotional intensity that just repels me, especially this part.
I see your face cloud over like a little girl's in your eyes.
That's a brutal song clip for me, my friends. Dan began writing Sometimes When We Touch in 1973 when he was only 19. To complete the song, a few years later, he collaborated with the legendary Barry Mann, who wrote the music for the recorded track. The lyrics were inspired by Dan's complicated relationship with a woman he cared about deeply, but he struggled to open up to. When he finally finished the song, he played it for her, hoping it might change things. The timing couldn't have been worse. She decided to move to the U.S. with another man she'd been seeing, an American football player who'd recently been cut from the Toronto team from the CFL. Honestly, though, this song may have been the deciding factor that pushed her to leave for sure. I'm just kidding. You know how it is. You just don't dig certain things. But the cheese quotient on Sometimes When We Touch, it's piled on really thick. Especially with the modeling chorus, I want to hold you till I die, till we both break down and cry. I mean, come on. It's painful. I actually talked to Barry Mann about this song, and this is what he said about the music. So Sometimes When We Touch. Huge hit, put Dan on the map, Dan Hill, and went to number 3. And, it's interesting, as I was watching something a few years ago about Dan Hill talking about it and how kind of his experience in writing with people. Tell me the story about that, because he told the story about how he was sitting in a restaurant and got the pink phone and you were on the phone.
Yes.
And, so tell me about that. That's a great
thought
story.
that happened the same day, but he says it happened the next day. But he was touted to me through my publisher as far as somebody to write with. I said, great. And I had heard one of his songs, Hold On, I think it was called, and I really liked it a lot.
It's then you gotta hold on.
Which sounded like a song, like a professional song. Then, the other songs I heard, he rambled. His songs were rambling kind of songs, There was no clear verse or chorus or bridge. Just rambled. Anyway, so we came up and he came to the office and we sat down to write, and he gave me this lyric, Sometimes When We Touch. And I liked it, I liked it. And so I started messing around with it. And he said, I said, you know, well, go out of the room for a second. Could you just leave? Let me just mess with it myself.
Yeah.
So I thought that this was all on the same day that he had an appointment at the Beverly Hills Hotel for lunch. So while he was gone, I finished the song, you know, and I really liked it. You know,
Yeah.
I changed some of the lyrics. I mean, I made the chorus, the bridge shorter, and I was very excited about it, you know. And so I called him at the Beverly Hills Hotel, you know.
Yeah.
So he says,
Before the days of cell phones,
Yeah,
when
yeah,
they
yeah,
brought
right.
the big phone to the table.
So they brought it to the table, and he gets on the phone, and I'm, you know, because he's not used to writing with guys.
Yeah.
He hears this guy saying, "Man, you got a smash! It sounds fantastic." You know, one of those kind of things. and anyway, the song became a smash. But I didn't know he didn't really like the song. The song is a very schmaltzy song.
Yeah.
You know, it's very, very schmaltzy. You know. But I don't really care. I mean, I liked it, you know?
Yeah, well, many others liked it too.
Yes.
Rod Stewart,
Yes.
you know, Tammy Wynette, Tina Turner.
Tina Turner.
Tina
Yeah,
Turner, I
just so
love
many
her
great
version.
versions
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
And an interesting little chart fact, it was actually part of what they call the Bee Gees sandwich. The Bee Gees had 4 of the top 5 songs in America, and the only thing that kept them from tying the Beatles record, it was
That
Sometimes When We
song.
Touch.
Yeah,
That was right in the middle of those Bee Gees songs. Love Sometimes When We Touch back in '77. The ballad cruised to #1 in Canada and South Africa and #3 here on the Billboard Hot 100. You know, Dan actually told a funny story. He said, Sometimes When We Touch was so popular in the late 70s that one evening in a bowling alley, a very obese woman that he didn't even know walked over to where he was sitting and just plopped on his lap. And this stranger refused to get off his lap until he sang the song for her. All right, so the third biggest single of 1977 in Billboard Magazine's year-end review happens to be the third cheesiest song of our 70s countdown here. I've got You Light Up My Life by Pat Boone's daughter, Debbie Boone. Now, I know I'm going to piss some people off with this choice, and there's a lot of people out there that love this song. I just happen not to be one of them. I mean, even as a 3-year-old kid, it made my ears bleed. Although it was written by Joe Brooks to be a love song, as a devout Christian, Debbie Boone interpreted You Light Up My Life as more of a spiritual song. Instead, she proclaimed that it was God who lit up her life, not another earthly being. Her words. It was written as the theme song for the movie the same name, which was, not surprisingly, a box office flop. Lead actress Didi Khan, most known for her role as Frenchie in the movie Grease, she lip-synced to the song in the movie. Despite tanking in theaters, though, Joe Brooks won the Oscar for Best Original Song in a Film for You Light Up My Life at the '78 Grammy Awards. Rough times. Overall, Joe Brooks, who passed away in 2011, had a successful yet checkered career. After a brief run as a singer, he became a very sought-after commercial writer. He created some of the catchiest product jingles of the 60s. Actually did jingles for Pepsi and Maxwell House Coffee. Joe's songwriting debut was You Light Up My Life. And, I mean, how would that be? To have your first songwriting credit turn into the single that broke Elvis Presley's Billboard record. The sudden acclaim on the big international spotlight mushroomed Joe's ego to the point where he developed a reputation of being pretty difficult to work with. Things were fairly rosy for Joe over the next 25 years. However, his name would eventually be permanently marred when he was indicted on 11 bizarre counts of assault and other charges. In 2009, 2 years before his death, his personal assistant was found guilty of criminal facilitation for her part in luring, aspiring actresses to meet with Joe in New York City under the ruse that they were going to get an audition for a part in a movie that he was involved in. And so that's how that happened. Such a crazy subplot, presenting a dark shadow behind a song that was made famous by such a righteous singer like Debbie Boone. You Light Up My Life was the epitome of a smash hit. It became the biggest single of the 70s in the US, setting a new Billboard Hot 100 record for weeks spent at #1. That's at least back then. It went to #1 for 10 weeks. It beat out Elvis Presley's record of 9 weeks at the top. You know, when his double A side combo at Don't Be Cruel and Hound Dog went to number 1 for 9 weeks.
The future looks right ahead. Don't be cruel. You ain't nothing but a hound crying all the time.
She overtook the King. Of course, that record's been broken many times since then by some other, you know, semi-terrible songs. Not all of them. Anyway. Okay. Let's get back to the countdown of the top 5 cheesiest songs of the 70s. I got a song that's about the romance between rodents. Muskrat Love by Captain and Tennille at number 2.
Looks like muskrat love.
Ah, yes. Muskrat Love. The story of 2 love-struck muskrats, Susie and Sammy, who was very skinny, apparently.
Sam is so skinny.
If you've ever wondered about the secret courtship of the muskrat, that mystery was unveiled by songwriter Willis Allen Ramsey. The 2 swamp rats whirled and they twirled and they tangoed, kissing, rubbing toes, and nibbling on cheese.
They whirled and they twirled and they tangled.
We even discovered that muskrats do the jitterbug in a no humans allowed location called Muskrat Land.
To the jitterbug out at Muskrat Land.
Willis Allen Ramsey put his song on his lone album in 1972. It went by the original title, Muskrat Candlelight. Can you believe this? You can't make this stuff up.
Muskrat, candlelight.
And let's be honest, that was the last time that this song should have ever been recorded. But it wasn't. Next up to take a swing at Muskrat Love was America, the band America.
Muskrat, candlelight.
They recorded it for their 1973 album Hat Trick, and interestingly, it was only the second time they recorded a song that wasn't written by one of the band members. So when the 3 America principals, Jerry Beckley, Dewey Bunnell, and Dan Peek were putting together the album, they each agreed to write 3 songs. Each would bring 3 to the table. And that left 1 spot open because they wanted 10 songs. They decided that would go to a cover that they could all get behind. Now, their bass player, David Dickey, was the one who brought them Muskrat Candlelight, the original by Willis Allen Ramsey. Jerry Beckley later said, "To us, it sounded like a very bluesy, quirky tune. We just thought it was quirky and commercial, so we worked it up." I don't know how anybody would listen to that and think it was a good idea, but America released Muskrat Love as their lead single from their 3rd studio album, Hat Trick. The single went to number 11 on the adult contemporary chart, but it completely flopped on the Billboard Hot 100, dying at number 67.
Floating like the heavens above.
After 2 platinum albums, sales dramatically dipped for Hat Trick for America. The LP didn't come close to gold status. America's version of Muskrat Love had a certain folksy charm to it. I'm trying to be positive. But the Cheese really came out with a so-called signature rendition by Captain and Tennille.
Susie says yes with a kiss.
It kind of makes you wonder, why would anyone want to remake this song twice or 3 times? Toni Tennille and her then-husband, Daryl Dragon, the Captain, they performed Muskrat Love in their live set, and when they had 1 slot to fill for their second album, Song of Joy in '76, like America, they decided to record Muskrat Love. They included the synth instrumental bridge that Daryl created for their live show. The synth section was supposed to simulate a sort of cartoonish romantic banter between the muskrats, Sammy and Susie. But it was the part of the Captain and Tennille version that either made you laugh or throw up in your mouth. You choose. Despite the moldy cheese factor, though, the Captain and Tennille's version was a smash. Even though Captain and Tennille had said they weren't all that eager to spotlight Muskrat Love in their repertoire, they ended up performing it at a White House dinner in July of '76 held in honor of Queen Elizabeth II. The choice raised a few eyebrows. One guest even told the press afterward that singing about mating muskrats in front of the Queen was in very poor taste. Again, you can't make this stuff up.
Puzzle now, anything goes as they wriggle.
Tony retorted, basically telling the critics to get a life. The song was as gentle as a Disney movie. Capitalizing on their huge popularity in pop culture at the time, the Captain and Tennille's Muskrat Love thoroughly tickled the fancy of music fans in Canada, where the song went to number 1. It wiggled all the way to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it went to number 1 on the AC chart. Sorry, I had to say wiggle. Okay, everybody, this is not going to be a shocker. The song that comes in at number 1 on our countdown of the top 5 cheesiest songs of the 70s is The Ridiculous Rise of One Disco Duck by Rick Dees and his cast of idiots.
I'm the disco duck.
What I consider to be the worst song in the history of our planet. I still kind of have that feeling. I remember my dad used to tease me that this was my favorite song, knowing how much I hated it. He actually bought the tape just to play it at the most opportune times, or inopportune times, whichever. I miss him so much. In the mid-70s, disco fever was sweeping across America like a polyester-clad tidal wave. Dance floors were glowing, bell-bottoms were flaring, and funky grooves were everything. Right in the middle of that glittery boogie-fueled craze came one of the most unexpected and bizarre hits in pop music history, Disco Duck. And the person responsible for the piece of garbage known as Disco Duck was not a seasoned singer, not a studio slick disco producer either. It was a Memphis radio personality named Rick Dees, known more for spinning records and making them. He hosted the morning show at WHBQ and had a sharp, irreverent sense of humor.
Flapping my arms, I begin to cluck.
Now, Rick was right to think that the disco craze was ripe for parody. He had an outrageous idea, and it was, what if a duck got caught up in the disco madness? Plus, one of his talents, if you want to call it that, was doing a Donald Duck impersonation. Actually, it's a pretty good Donald Duck impersonation. So in 1976, Rick wrote a novelty song about a guy who starts dancing at a club only to suddenly start quacking and flapping like a duck. Hey, it happens to the best of us.
All of a sudden I begin to change.
The duck becomes a dance sensation. It was all absurd. It was all goofy. It was fun. But Rick Dees was serious about making it sound legit. He definitely understands how to attract a listening audience. Rick gathered a group of musicians and friends he jokingly called Rick Dees and his cast of idiots. And that was the one time where he was the most honest in his life, because it was a cast of idiots. Together, they laid down the track in Memphis, complete with a Donald Duck-style voice. Like I said, performed by Dees himself. Did a great job. And an ultra-catchy beat that rattled any real disco track of the day, which wasn't saying much. I mean, Disco Duck was intentionally stupid, but I have to even admit, it was irresistibly infectious. I mean, there's a reason why it was the #1 hit.
Moving my feet to the disco beat.
But there was one big hurdle that Rick had to overcome to get it on the radio. The radio station that Rick worked for wouldn't let him play his own song on the air. I mean, they were afraid of a conflict of interest. And then the other stations in town wouldn't play the song either because it promoted their competition. It was a conundrum. But Disco Duck, it would not be denied. It found a life of its own. Stations outside of Memphis picked it up and it spread like wildfire. Within weeks, it was charting. Before long, Disco Duck actually waddled all the way to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, selling over 6 million copies, even landing on the soundtrack as Saturday Night Fever. Well, the actual song was removed from the film, which was a really good thing. Thankfully, Disco Duck was the only hit for Rick Dees and his cast of idiots. He was a one-hit wonder. Rick would later move to Hollywood to become one of the most popular names on the airwaves. And let's be clear, he was great. He's still great. He was also a co-host on Solid Gold in the 80s and currently the host of the internationally syndicated radio show Rick Dees Weekly Top 40.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Rick Dees.
He's great at what he does, that's for sure. And he can also take some solace in the fact that he may have single-handedly obliterated an entire genre of music with one bad song. Looking back on the cheese factor from the 70s, there were a lot of TV actors that wanted to be pop stars and made records in that time. There was the late David Soul, who played Detective Kenneth Hutch Hutchinson in the TV crime drama Starsky and Hutch, with his sidekick played by Paul Michael Glaser. Do you remember David's #1 hit, Don't Give Up on Us? It was about as cheesy as it gets, but I dare you not to sing along. Yeah, great chorus.
Don't give up on us, baby.
And of course, then there was John Travolta when he was playing Vinnie Barbarino on the TV comedy Welcome Back, Kotter. He put out a cover of Gary Benson's Let Her In. It was a #10 hit on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1976.
Gonna let her in my life.
I should do a countdown on actors or actresses that have covered songs. Let me know if you want to see that. I think my favorite tune by TV actors in the 70s, though, it's got to be the Brady Bunch when they recorded It's a Sunshine Day. That ditty's so bad, it's awesome.
Into the sunshine.
We owe Stephen McCarthy for the ball of comfort cheese. If you don't have a CD copy or a download of It's a Sunshine Day, you can find it on the Best of the Brady Bunch collection. I have 2 copies of that, so I never lose it.
Everybody's laughing. Sunshine day. Everybody sings.
I hope you had a good time reminiscing and hearing stories about some of the cheesiest musical moments of the 70s. Let me know if you'd like to see more of these or the actor countdown. Let's talk about it in the comments as well. What's the worst song of all time, the worst song of the 70s? And what are your memories of these songs? And what do you think about actors covering songs? Who's the best? Heartbeat by Don Johnson? Let's have a great discussion below. If you like our content, we invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community. Until next time, 3 quarts of the truth, my friends.